That's a good question, and generally it's not something that the police are looking for. I mean, when we see people walking down the street, that's not a big deal. Generally, where students get into trouble is when they're showing what we call drunk facts. Somebody's stumbling. We talked about, a young lady, say, walking home in the cold weather with her shoes in her hands. Anything that's unusual that might draw attention. Sometimes it's kids just having a good time, hooting and hollering. You can tell by the way it's going on and the time of the night and everything that there's a possible intoxication involved. And yes, it can be an issue if you are under 21. Because you're under 21 under Missouri law, you can actually be in possession of alcohol by consumption, which means you've already got the alcohol in your system, and if the officer detects that alcohol by smell or by your actions and what they see, then you could be cited for minor possession by consumption. A lot depends on what kind of condition the student is in. If they're beyond the point where we feel like they can care for themselves safely, then they could be taken into custody. If it's somebody who just has alcohol in their breath and maybe was just being a little loud late at night, they could be released with a citation. The officer has to use their discretion in those cases. What we don't want is to not get somebody who is under 21 the proper care and then something bad happened later in the night. So it's always looking at the welfare of that student. So the more cooperative the student is, once you're caught, you're caught. And I mean, there's really no point in it. Sometimes students want to do things like run from the police. That's always a mistake. Or resist the fact that they're being stopped by the police. That's a mistake as well. All of those things are considered when the officer's making a decision on how best to handle the situation. Well, there's a lot of different things that could happen, and again, it depends on the actions of the people involved. The first thing that I would like to say is don't hesitate. If you feel like in your judgment this person needs medical attention, let's get them the medical attention and worry about that other stuff later. And when the police arrive or when the ambulance arrive, what they're going to be looking for is the medical welfare of that student. That's going to be our primary concern. So I won't sit here and tell you won't get in trouble, but I'm going to tell you that's not what we're looking for. When we get a medical emergency, we want to make sure that person gets to the hospital or gets the proper care that they need, and that's number one. I think probably trying to hinder the officers, let's say all the alcohol's in the kitchen, and well, you can't go in there, officer, and those kinds of things once they got in there. Or, no, you can't take my roommate away, they're going to stay here. Can't you just give them something? Something like that that would alert the officers that maybe this person might be a danger to themselves or someone else.
Okay.
And that's primarily what we're looking for as police officers. We want to make sure that when we do leave a scene, that there's not any danger that we can't justify,
Right.
if you will. Obviously, if somebody's officer, I'm getting ready to go to bed, my roommate's sick, thank you for taking care of them, that person's probably not going to have any problems. If they get into argument or something like that or resist the officers in some way, it could cause some problems. And that's why my advice is always cooperate with the officers to the extent that you can. What's done is done at this point. And you want to get your friend or your roommate or whoever the help that they need, and we'll worry about the other stuff later. We do not single out the Stripes vehicles. We are very, very big fans of Stripes. If that takes, I don't care how old they are, if that takes an intoxicated driver off the street, they just help us immensely. And that's the way we look at Stripes, is they're our allies, and we would do nothing to harm that program. And if the students can't trust Stripes and expect that that's going to be a safe ride home, they're not going to use it.
Right.
So it would be counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish, which is make sure people get home safely, regardless of what they've been doing that night. student who does the right thing and gets a ride home from a sober driver, again, those actions, once they get out of the car, are going to be what draw the attention of the police. So if you get to the front door of your house or your sorority house or fraternity house or wherever it is you are, and you get out of the car and you walk into the house, and you're not hooting and hollering and shooting fireworks and doing things that intoxicated people do, you're probably not going to draw the attention. Theoretically, they could, but most likely not, because the person that, if I'm a police officer, I stop that vehicle, the person I'm going to be looking at is the person who has the beer in their hand. And so I'm not going to ride everybody in the car, because obviously, well, most people don't share beers like that.
Right.
But what we would do our best to investigate. Now, let's just say, for instance, for the sake of argument, this under 21 person hands it to the sober driver. Well, you're in possession of it. That could happen. My advice to somebody who is going to be a sober driver for someone is, to the extent that you can, I realize there's situations where you can't, but tell people, look, you're getting in my car, I'm under 21, put the beer in the trash can and I'll take you home. Right. And you make that effort and you can tell the officer that, we're going to be reasonable. We're going to be reasonable. And even if something bad happened, and I feel certain you go in and you explain to a judge the efforts you took, but you couldn't do it and you felt like it was worth the risk to get this person home safely, you're going to be just fine. We were fearful that with the number of people that were coming out of the bars at once and not having the police presence, what we found is that we were having fights and things break out where there was not a law enforcement presence. We have seen an increase in the number of assault arrests where people are getting into fights and fighting with each other. Again, those drunk facts I was talking to you about that draw the attention of the police. We have seen the number of assault arrests go up. The actual number of assaults has not. So obviously the police being down there, they're more likely to see the fights when they're happening, and I think that's why those arrests are up. My hope is that when people come out of the bars, they stop and think that there's a police presence here now, and what I need to do is behave myself and go home. If I'm intoxicated, find a safe way home, get a taxi, ride the Stripes or whatever, and clear the downtown area after hours. And that was our intent, and I think what it's doing, the additional officer presence down there is actually accomplishing that. And what we want is a safe and vibrant downtown where you can go and you can have a few drinks and not worry about being assaulted by somebody that you accidentally brush up against. So that's the reason for the additional presence. I don't know that there's a better time. I would say that if I were serious about avoiding some of the crowds and things like that, one of the issues we have is when every bar closes and everybody goes into the street. And that seems to be where the bulk of the incidents occur. And it's just because, there are a lot of people in this small place. So I guess if I had advice for somebody that wanted to avoid that kind of stuff is watch the clock and leave about 20 minutes before the bar closes. You're going to have a better chance of getting a Stripes ride, a better chance of getting a taxi ride or whatever, just leaving a few minutes early, and you avoid all those crowds. Because you're providing alcohol to a minor, and it's one of those things that gets college students in trouble time and time again. It's difficult to resist the temptation, especially when your friend's saying, come on, buy me a beer, I'll be 21 in 2 months. It's not worth the risk because you're going to be the party that's held responsible, because under the eyes of the law, you're an adult and they are not. If you knowingly provided it to someone and they use it in an illegal manner to obtain alcohol, yes, you can. If somebody steals it or finds it or whatever, of course that doesn't apply. But what we find usually is, Kim lent me her driver's license and I'm using it to buy beer. Well, again, the providing alcohol to minors kicks in. If you notice, the bars or most of the bars downtown have people at the door checking IDs. It is a tremendous liability risk for them. And it would be a tremendous liability risk for you as an individual to have that kind of a party without safeguards in place. And, you know, I just advise against it, anything like that, because when you're charging an admission, you're buying that responsibility. You know, I have mixed emotions about that, and I'll tell you, if the conditions are conducive, then I say go to the bathroom in the business where you are. I fully recognize that crowds and things like that get too large, and sometimes people say, you know, you've got to go, and I'm going to go outside or whatever. What we find, though, is they do it out in view of the public, and that's usually where the police get the attention, or it comes to the attention of the police. And I guess I would just say, if you have an emergency like that and you've got to go, get out of the view of the public. Because if you're out of the view of the public, the chances are the police aren't going to see you either.
Right.
And so behind a dumpster is much better than in front of it. I mean, just think. And a lot of times we run into people that are so intoxicated they don't, and they're urinating in the middle of a parking lot or whatever, and it comes to the attention of the police, and then it's against the law.